Hi, Benga, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So the platform is still going on. We're hoping that they finish on time, but I've sort of let them know that since we book people's time for a particular time, we'll probably have to stick with that.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'll just wait for everybody else to join. We expect guests to start joining at 3 p.m. With the program still going on, I'm not too certain how that will play out, but we'll do our best.
Okay, that's fine. And nice to meet you in person.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much again. I'm so sorry, I just went into full. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. And I hope we have a good conversation, and then we still have all our For Africa conversations. So
okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah. We actually have people who have joined in already. Hi, Maya. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for joining in. We have one additional panelist that isn't on the slides that I shared, but I'll introduce him. His name is Chuka Ofili.
Okay, and just to clarify, we're starting at 9 a.m. or at 3 p.m., correct?
3 p.m. Nigerian time. So the televised event is still going on. So we're all following up on the group, but I've sort of indicated that if we made a commitment to start at 3, that we should start at 3. But the televised event is still ongoing. Well, at least the live version on YouTube is still ongoing.
Okay,
apparently
so
when you get a lot of people to talk, then they tend to talk a bit more.
Okay, so I'll be on at 3 exactly.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I'll see you shortly. Okay, bye.
Yeah, okay, cheers. Hi, Bosun. Your mic is muted, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How's everything?
Not bad, man. Not bad.
Thank you so much for joining in. Let me follow up with Chika. I suspect that a lot of people are still following the program. But let me just make sure that it's just Chika actually. Bosun, you're connected in from the UK, right?
Yes, I'm down.
Okay. So we have between 9 and 10 questions. I'm hoping that we'll have to figure out how to do it. But because we have an additional panelist, Chuka Ofili. You may know him, Bosun, actually. Chuka Ofili will be joining the panel. So I'll see how I do it, but I'll try to make sure that we cover sort of the important bits and we're able to take it from there.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I can give my slots to Chuka.
Hi, Chika.
Hi, Soromfe. Okay, I'm about to join from my laptop or my phone now.
Okay.
Yeah, I should change position.
So I was saying to everybody that there's one more panelist that will be joining us, and that's Chuka Ofili.
Okay.
Yeah, so Chuka has just joined in now. So Chuka will also be speaking to the skilling side of things, but more from, like from an individual's perspective. You are approaching it more from the Decagon and Della style, solving the large scale problem. Chuka will be approaching it from the perspective of an individual looking to sort of get into that global workspace and how to approach it and what they need to do.
Yeah.
We can still see your mobile.
Yeah, let me come out.
Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you, Chuka.
Okay, great. I'm just setting everything up properly. Use video. Trying to get my video to come correct. Hang on a sec. Okay, how's my video? Is it good?
Yes.
Looks very technical, like a very technical person.
It was about to look like a production studio, so I needed to open it up and look closely just to be sure.
Office. Let me change position so I can get to look a little bit more technical.
Yeah. Just change my lights.
Wow.
Lights.
Light. Yeah. Let's see.
Hello everyone. Bosun DB. How you guys doing? Chika.
I'm looking for you.
You're still looking for me.
I'm looking for you. Are we
Okay.
We're live. So can people hear us?
Yeah, so we're gonna start for 3, Chuka.
Okay, people cannot hear us.
Not just yet.
I think they can.
Oh, they can?
I think they can, yeah. It's friendly banter, don't worry. You're safe. We haven't said anything wrong yet, Chuka.
Hi, Chuka, can you hear me?
So I'll just wait for, yes, we can hear you.
I hear you.
Awesome. Yeah. We can hear you, but we can see you, Bosun. I figure we can also hear you. We just need to wait for Maya. She said she'll be on at exactly 3, so let's just give her. But I'd like to say, let me just quickly check from the chat. Can everybody in the room hear? Okay, yes. So everybody, they can hear us clearly. Okay, fantastic. Let's just wait for Maya to join in, and then we'll start. So first of all, apologies to everybody who has connected in already. We just want to give it about 2 minutes for people to join in really quickly. And then one last panelist, and then we'll get going really quickly. I know that the live session is still ongoing, but because we made a commitment to start at 3 o'clock, I think it's important that we start at 3 o'clock. We've blocked people's calendars for that time. So let me quickly just be sure. Okay, so we have Maya with us. Welcome, Maya.
Hello, thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I think that it's 3:02. I know that a ton of people, we have about 450 people who have registered for the session. I hope that they realize it will still start at 3 o'clock, but I figure they'll meet us at some point. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody who has joined for this panel. This is the technology panel for the platform 2020. This is the digital workshop. And today we will be exploring a topic that we've sort of called positioning Nigeria strategically to derive economic value from the global digital ecosystem. Now, to have this conversation, we have 5 very amazing people here with us today, and they will be dealing with the different aspects of this conversation in very interesting ways, very interesting perspectives, and I'm really grateful that they've all accepted to be here. Very quickly, I had a personal debate as to whether to read everybody's very imposing profile or to just do a quick introduction. Given the number of questions that we have, I think that I'll do a quick introduction for everybody. And I'm sure that people can always go to LinkedIn and Google. First of all, everybody here is already very popular. So for those that need to find out, they'll be able to find that out. So for the panelists, we have Maya Horgan Famadu. She's the founder and partner of Ingressive Capital. It's a $10 million venture capital firm focused on African tech. We also have Chika Nwobi, who is the founder and CEO of Decagon. He has done a number of different things, but he's currently wearing the Decagon hat, and he's more or less working around software engineering upskilling in Nigeria and on the continent, I guess. We have Bosun Tijani, who is the founder and CEO of Co-Creation Hub, which for, I guess, over a decade has been the melting pot for the technology ecosystem in Nigeria. We have Olugbenga GB Agboola, who is the co-founder and CEO of Flutterwave. I think one way or the other, you've done something with Flutterwave at this point. They've more or less democratized access to transaction platforms for most small businesses in Nigeria and large-scale enterprises. And then lastly, or finally, we have Chuka Ofili, who is the co-founder or the founder and CEO of Interstellar Labs, and he's a software architect and software engineer. So thank you so much for joining the panelists. Thank you for making out time from your very busy schedules to join us. And thank you also to the 66 people or thereabout that have joined. The plan is to make sure that this conversation is worth your time and that we're able to share, interact, take questions at the end if we have time. And probably at the end of this conversation, we have a clear view or a clear idea on how we derive this economic value from the global ecosystem. Now, in approaching or thinking through this topic, one of the things that I did was to sort of split it into 4 pillars very quickly. One was capital. How do we efficiently deploy capital towards technology startups on the continent? And perhaps maybe the continent is not the best place to deploy that capital, but well, we'll have that conversation and see the perspectives we get from the panelists. We also want to look at technology entrepreneurship. How do I launch a startup? What problems should I be looking at? What's the wise thing to do? What approaches should I be considering? The third pillar is skills. And that more or less speaks to, first of all, we have a population glut. We have a lot of young people. How do we bring this up all together in such a way that people are able to get the right skills to fix the global demand for technology skills, or to fill in some parts the global demand for technology skills? And then the final bit is obviously ecosystems. How do we bring all these different pieces together to make some sense of it, to drive synergies, to drive optimization, to make sure that different parts are talking together and we're able to get the network effects that you will typically get from conversations like that. So very quickly, I'll just jump into the questions at this point. And Maya, I would be starting with you. I think the capital bit is one bit that many people are interested in. I think Jared Cohen during the live broadcast also alluded to, answered some questions around that. So I would like to put one of the questions to you. The first one here is, what are the key trends we are seeing with the flow of capital towards technology-related startups, both globally and here in Africa or Nigeria, for instance? Is there room for African capital? And what deployment strategy to achieve good returns is best? And it's open to you to define what good returns would be.
Okay, so, and I want to clarify, are people asking about the key trends on the investor side or on the startup side? Because I can talk
on the investor side.
Okay, so I'll start the macro and go into the micro. So every year since 2016, there's been about a 2x increase in the amount of VC dollars flowing into the ecosystem. Like in 2016, it was 129 million. The next year is like 560. The next year was 1.2, et cetera, et cetera. So in general, we're seeing a 2x, which is unprecedented and unlike any other ecosystem that we have seen so far. And can you guys hear me? Just want to make sure.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. Like any other ecosystem that we've seen so far, like the growth in the Silicon Valley, the growth in China, the growth in India, we have not seen this so far. Also, with that, the number of international top tier investors that are starting to actively invest in or shift their strategy to include sub-Saharan Africa. Even in the recent acquisitions, liquidity events that we've seen and international IPOs from companies listing on the London to the Toronto to the US stock exchange, even in the last 1 year, the key trends is we're finally seeing, on that note, what we're finally seeing is international capital focusing on the continent, and also IPO and liquidity events happening that sort of provide the full circle of funding, from the founders to exiting, and then those who originally started companies starting to reinvest and dedicate Africa-focused funds, which brings not only the capital and financing side, but also the expertise, the advisory, the local access, which is the essential other component of building an ecosystem. And as far on the key trends, what we're seeing on the startup side, or what we're seeing as far as where investors are most excited to invest, of course, it's still in the financial services, telecommunications, sort of traditional digital infrastructure plays. I would say that ecosystems across the continent, as they, or in emerging markets as they develop, start as like 1.0, which is B2B, financial services, telecommunications infrastructure. The next one's B2C, financial services, then it goes to e-commerce, then it goes to mobility, and then sort of spreads from there. And we're sort of at that final tier of the initial phase of the ecosystem. And as far as deployment strategy, that's a question about for investors who want to actively participate in the ecosystem?
Exactly, and particularly for African investors. So, there's the perspective of being able to get the foreign flows coming in. But if you looked at a Nigerian high net worth individual who was looking to make those sort of investments, so first of all, do you see that as a play that is beginning to take root in the market? Is there an opportunity there to get local investors interested? And then either whether it's local or foreign, what sort of deployment strategy do you see as working best?
Yeah, and so I think that because there is more of a limit of venture capital dollars, and capital is more expensive on the continent as it is in the Western world, I think it's essential for local and international investors to work together to participate in companies. One, you cannot negate the importance of having local expertise, not only for sort of regulatory insights, which we see how essential that is, particularly in the Nigerian market, the sort of foresight about the strength of the currency, the recession, the devaluation, anything that's happening locally. It's absolutely essential to have an investor participating to not only support the company, give them the connections, but also advise and participate in the diligence process for investors. So I would say on deployment, at least for our fund, which we've seen work out effectively, is 80% of the limited partners in our own fund run later stage investment vehicles. So we do the pre-seed to seed stage investment and then pass those deals on to international investors. And our competitive advantage is that we're on ground. We see deals before they do, and also those things like the diligence and advice on the sort of next year or what's happening in the local markets where we're participating. So I think it's essential for local capital to collaborate with international capital, at least till we get to the point in the ecosystem. Because right now, the liquidity events have afforded the angel investors and the HNIs to start participating actively in the ecosystem with that sort of informed capital, that tech experienced capital. But right now we don't have, we're not at that critical mass stage where our domestic venture capital and private equity funds can support the growth of technology companies to IPO. So we will get to that point. And we're seeing increasingly, like the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority invested in our fund. We're seeing the Botswanan investment, or their sovereign wealth fund, different sovereign wealth funds and government entities. So institutional capital starting to invest in the venture capital space and the technology space across the continent. So as we increasingly see that, we'll see more of the ability for domestic firms to entirely be able to support the growth of technology companies in the ecosystem. But until we get to that point, we'll continue seeing the collaboration and that competitive advantage of local investors being their access, their insights, their deal flow.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think just going on from that, GB, so we have these funds coming in, we have the different conversations as to well, would I say the returns or the profitability of these investments? Obviously, the local challenges that we face here. But on the other hand, we have people with an entrepreneurial dent and with a desire to launch startups to do something in the technology space. My question to you, GB, well, Olugbenga, would be how do startups on the continent address the right set of problems and position themselves adequately to achieve measurable economic success? And the basis of that question is, I had an interesting conversation with a friend in the tech space, and she sort of pointed out to me to say there's a lot of B2C startup activity. You hear a lot of conversations around it, but in her opinion at that time, and it will be great to have your thoughts on this, in her opinion, there is a huge potential in the B2B space, especially because you're managing a finite or a limited number of customers. It's easier to get the deal flow going through. It's easier to get revenue coming in. 1 or 2 or 3 deals would probably enable you run for a period of time. So what are your thoughts on this? What would your advice or counsel be? One, based on your experience and the conversations you're having in the ecosystem. Your microphone is muted. Okay.
Okay, thanks so much. So my view on that is pretty much around the infrastructure access that we're solving for as entrepreneurs in Nigeria. If you dial back a little bit, you realize that the reason why there's so much internet companies in Nigeria today trying to solve some issue or the other is due to the infrastructure of GSM in Nigeria a couple of years ago, right? So once the infrastructure is solved, the next step, in my view, is B2B companies will spring up to build access, right, across the spectrum.
Okay.
So logistics could be payment, it could be commerce. And once those pillars are built, the next wave of startups will naturally evolve, right? For example, the reason why a bunch of the companies in the US today are successful is because of the infrastructure for payment that is pretty much highly, it's very, very, strong in Africa, or logistics or commerce. When those 3 things pillars are established, right, you will see a lot of companies building the tools to access them across board. So for me, what I see here is the B2B companies are building the infrastructure tools, and the B2C guys are building the access for the consumers to be able to access those tools. So you see a lot of B2B companies like in the payment space, logistics space, but of course, I'm especially D2C guys as well to scale, because now the access to those infrastructure is there, right? You can build anything in any space, from like what Chika is doing, for example, in the B2B space for software engineers. That's an example of how that is bridging the gap, because now there are companies in the space who will have a gap for software engineers to scale their business, right? Those gaps would naturally exist, and that creates a new set of companies who will then be able to create scalable platforms that can then be, that is bankable by investors. And that's where I see the opportunity here. And it's growing across board. And one thing I say is, despite everything, we can't entrepreneur our way out of basic infrastructure, right? Those things have to exist first before startups can scale and be bankable, right? And one basic 3 pillars that I see that has helped, like of China, that we also can tap in Africa is, payment is there, commerce is working, logistics is also working. Those 3 pillars, if they are there in Africa at the moment, you will see much more companies scaling and building new tools that will enable the consumers to access those tools and scale. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, GB. So off of that question, Chika, one of the interesting things, and there are a number of ways to look at this, but obviously with the potential for these entrepreneurial ventures, you would need skills. You would need skilled people to deliver the solutions, to manage the solutions, to take the solutions to market, and things like that. So my question to you is that, one, the skills gap, well, in Nigeria, on the African continent, is huge. There is an increased demand for technology skills currently globally. And with the increased adoption of remote working, that opportunity seems to have been increased or to be more acceptable. Now, my question is, how do we benefit as a country by matching this population glut, this growing youth population, to this global demand for technology skills? Obviously, there will be the argument that maybe we're a bit behind the curve, but I know that you're doing work in that space. So what do we do? How do we position ourselves to be able to derive some value from almost matching that demand to that supply that we have locally, so to say?
Yeah, so you're talking about the global demand, and GB also talked about even the present local demand. So to give context to our listeners, globally in America alone, so live global, in America alone, there's in this year 2020, there's estimated to be a shortage of 1 million unfilled software developer jobs, right? So 1 million jobs for software developers that are not filled in America because they don't have the people that are qualified to do the work. And it's the same in parts of Europe. Now, and what's the who is the right type of person? A brilliant young person that has software engineering skills, given this has historically, like in India over the last 20 years, has built an industry where big companies help to plug that gap, but the gap is still there. And so it seems like an opportunity that is a natural fit. It's huge potential for Nigeria. And this is why one of the reasons, this is the opportunity that I see that I'm trying to help Nigeria and this generation of Nigeria to realize. However, the reality, there's two realities that I've come across so far. Number one is that there's a global shortage. There's actually a local shortage as well. Nigeria has a small and leaking talent pipeline. So this pipeline is small and it's leaking because there's mobility of talents, right? Like brilliant software engineers can get a visa to go live anywhere they want in the world and work and earn a lot more. So the few that are good are leaving quickly, and you cannot blame them. And there's advantages for them leaving as well anyway. So so the reality is that we are so far not done enough, or not done what we need to do to be able to realize this potential. And listening to some of the other speeches today on platforms, some of the other discussions, it just hit me that actually this is just another huge potential that Nigeria has been the story of huge potential, of being naturally well placed to take advantage of something that there is demand for in the world. So far we actually, we haven't necessarily done so. Like oil is almost going away, and we are one of the few that had the oil, and we were not able to really fulfill our potential. So to me, this is not yet answering your question, but this is sounds a warning. This is sounding a warning that going by past track record only, one might conclude that we will not, right?
We're about to miss the boat again.
That we're going to miss the boat again, and we have almost, but therefore there must be a fierce urgency and really focused investment of resources, whether that's capital, attention, and so on, all hands on deck. Because what we found, so I've been doing Decagon for 2 years, and what we found, we've gone the full cycle. We've taken people really smart and unemployed, best of their class, leaders, first class, different things, right? But unemployed, and provided them with really intensive training, very rigorous, 6 months. We've created a bubble from the blockers and obstacles in Nigeria. So we give them power, high-speed internet, put them with other brilliant people, entirely merit-based to get in. And in 6 months, they're able to pick up a job as a software engineer and be productive for the local companies, whether that's companies like Terragon or Flutterwave or whatever company, right? They're able to contribute. In addition, we have some of them that we've retained as Decagon, and they've been able to contribute for global companies. We have some, really global tech companies that people that a year ago were not developers today are producing code that is going into production and are receiving on the cost feedback from the customer, are receiving 9s and 10s in quality of engineering and communication and everything. So it's doable, but Everybody knows this. By everybody, I mean all the other countries. Rwanda knows this. Mauritius knows this. Jamaica knows this. Rwanda is paying companies money to relocate engineers to their country. Mauritius is offering same thing, paying a year or half a year's salary back to the company for bringing people to their country. So just knowing it and just starting it is not enough. It's really a thing to where different stakeholders, and we've seen some very good, the CBN created the site, I work with them, they created the sci-fi fund that basically created software engineering loans for the first time. Some of the Nigerian bank, Access and Sterling, came on board are providing collateral-free loans to people to get trained. So people are coming on board. Main One provided like high-speed internet at really, what they call it, partnership rates or whatever. So people are coming, but it's an opportunity that is there for the taking. It's a quick, the loop is a relatively short loop. Unlike infrastructure, agriculture, there's a type of investment and cooperation that we will pull together in this country that in 2 years we will create 100,000 jobs and create some new cities with a particular type of but I'm not talking about just Soromfe and Maya and GB and Bosun and Chuka type of collaboration. I'm talking about, JFK saying
different sectors of the economy.
JFK saying America can put a man on the moon in 10 years. That type of, let's make this a priority, let's make it happen, and it can happen.
So what I hear is that while the potential is there, the scale of collaboration required to tap into that potential hasn't happened yet, and that is the challenge. That's correct. Okay. Interestingly, one of the reasons that we have Chuka on the panel is that while Chika approaches this as decagon, which is more or less maybe something similar to what Andela will do. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 decagons and Andelas, but that doesn't solve the problem for a population of whatever you think Nigeria's population is, 160, 200 million, whatever it is. So one of the insights that I think that Chuka would be sharing on is, as an individual in the tech space. So, in sharing, Chika Nwobi had pointed out to the very rigorous approach to getting these developers ready. So I'm sure that there is a very rigorous selection process. So there will be a number of people who wouldn't get into, maybe a cohort is, I don't know, maybe 100 people, but 100 doesn't even scratch the surface. So Chuka, for the other people who are interested in this space, who hear Chika Nwobi talking about the potential to get jobs with large multinationals and work remotely, but can't get into his very rigorous program. What are the opportunities? What are the options available? How can they access this type of opportunities, and what can they do practically? Your mic is muted.
Hi.
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. All right. So just before I dive into that question, I just wanted to also highlight, maybe further buttress in Chika's point. I mean, I know it's not as if Chika is very correct. It's something that needs to be done on a massive scale. And I feel, one of the routes to go through will probably to find a way to work with the educational, bodies that we have, either at the secondary level or at the state level. And I know, and I'm sure Bosun is aware, there was at some point the CC Hub has, or still, tried an initiative. If not, it's still active. I don't know what the state of that initiative is, where they were trying to work with, universities and polytechnics in the Yaba area. But of course, that was supposed to be a blueprint and a model that then we will take from a global perspective. I've had several meetings over the last year with both Facebook and Google, Facebook coming twice at least, and Google once, trying to get us practitioners into the, who are in the ecosystem, to see what can we do about skills acquisition, and, growth of talent, from a country perspective. And most of all the ideas always still centered around trying to find a way to work with educational bodies. I think that's, in my own opinion, that's probably one of the better or more structural and effective ways to scale. Of course, I'll be happy to hear what Bosu thinks about this as well. But in answering the question directly, I mean, I don't know if my facts are off or on, but I think close to 80% of engineers that I know in this ecosystem were all self-taught, right? I mean, and this is knowledge that they found, you know, a way to get on their own before the Andelas and the Decagons came around, right? And of course, we all need to be doing more in the ecosystem to be able to educate others. But if you find yourself as an individual who wants to come into the tech space, right? The first thing I will always say is, you don't necessarily need to be an engineer. You don't necessarily need to be a technical professional. There's also opportunities in the tech space that are non-engineering roles. And to me, those are far easier roles to reach out to get yourself acclimated into the tech ecosystem before you can then say, okay, onward into maybe more specific engineering roles and so on and so forth. And some of those roles, they're, I mean, from a global perspective as well, in short demand, in short supply. The truth is this, in high demand, short supply rather, you have a lot of tech ecosystem. Look, we're in the information age. So there are a lot of companies that are booming out, a lot of startups from a global perspective, not just in Nigeria. And these companies need people who would run their support systems. These companies will need people who will do research, product management, product design. All of these things are not necessarily engineering roles. They may be, roles related to technology, but they're not core. You don't need to learn how to program. You don't need to learn how to code. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is access to the information, right? Decagon is providing you with vigorous intensive training, and I'm assuming that's for core engineering skills and other talents that go with engineering. But, to lead customer success or to lead, customer service for a tech startup, understanding the tech legal, you don't necessarily need to be an engineer. So how do you access the information to be able to play in that space? There are a lot of platforms online that you can access for relatively affordable fees, right? And I'm being very practical. If you don't have the 2 million naira or 10 million naira to go to, this company or that company, or maybe if you're not lucky to get into a boot camp that pays you a salary to be able to learn, you can find a way, as long as you have a laptop, access to the internet. I think those are two critical things. And then you have platforms like, the Udemys of this world and the Coursera's of this world that can give you courses for as low as $20, $30 on a monthly cadence, or for the whole course itself. And then you start to pick up beginner information or beginner level skills. That's the easiest way to ease yourself in. And the funny thing is, once you find yourself in tech, pathways to other aspects based on your passion, your skill strengths will start to illuminate before you. And you will then know, okay, this is what I want to do, or this is where I'm going to do. And then you can have enough information to, guide your career, you know what I mean, to where it is that you want it to blossom or you want it to bloom. And I'm saying this because this is practically almost how I learned. When I learned, there were no Andelas, I was self-taught, right? I started learning at the time when Google was not even available. We had Ask Jeeves at that time. That was how we found information. That was how we learned. Far be it that, yes, it was the difficult way to learn, but that was the only way I knew. And then later on, I formalized my knowledge by buying books, watching videos. I believe people can do the same thing. Now, thank God we have institutions who are putting structured learning to this process, which will then make us, stand edge to edge competitive globally. And Nigeria, we have one of the most intelligent crop of human beings and one of the most skilled in the world. And I don't think that can be argued. So if you find yourself in a situation where you say, okay, I don't know the first step to take to learn how to code, you don't necessarily need to learn how to code, but you want to get into the ecosystem. Well, get a laptop, get internet, find access to some of these platforms I've talked about, educate yourself. The power can be in your hands, right? And then if people start to take this mentality, this is before we get the government or we get these multinational organizations who have the, fat wallets to come and help and partner. There's things you can do on your own to try and work in your own ecosystem.
Okay, thank you so much, Chuka. I think at this point, Bosun, I'll bring you in. So, Maya has more or less talked about how the local the local investors and foreign investors typically would have to work together to be able to derive the right sort of outcomes with working with startups in Nigeria and here on the continent. We've gotten a bit of a perspective on some of the nuances with the startup space in Nigeria from GB, Chika, and obviously Chuka have sort of looked at the skills perspective. Chika made the interesting note that we also have a local gap before we start to try and address the global one, and that the level of collaboration required to be able to tackle, tackle the challenge, but also enable us capture some value from the global ecosystem is not yet there. Now, bringing all these together is something that I know that Co-Creation Hub has been trying to do for a while. And you have extensive experience trying to bring all these different parties together and drive some level of impact in Nigeria and even on the continent. I know you've extended beyond Nigeria. So what are your thoughts around these different conversations? How do you see it? How do you see these different parts working together? What is missing? What needs to be done? Where do we go from here?
The conversation.
So we can hear.
I'm going to try.
Yes, we can hear you now.
The difficult part of the conversation to try and piece together. So
yes,
I can't take it forward. I'll just pass it on to Chika or Chuka or GB or Maya. You know, but I think it's exciting to listen to all these folks. You know, give their perspective. This conversation. The difficult part of it is actually where I like to be.
So Bosun, we seem to be, I don't know if it's just me, but we seem to be losing your audio for a bit. I'm not sure of what the challenge is. I know your mic is not muted, but we seem to be losing your audio.
Is it better now? Can you hear me now?
It's better. It sounds better now, yes.
Okay, I think I know what's happening there. So as I was saying, I think it's the part of the conversation that I like to be, because you know when we talk about tech, because of the numerous opportunities that it brings to individuals, there are so many aspects that we want to dig into. But the reality is that this is 2020. When we started CC Hub 10 years ago, what drove us to building CC Hub was based on what we saw. I used to work in innovation consulting in the UK. And my partner, Femi Lunga, was working in social innovation in London as well. And what we saw was the fact that tech was beginning to change the world we live in. And give it 10 to 15, 20 years time, it was literally going to disrupt competitiveness of nation. I know we're still talking about Nigeria not being where we want it to be. We're 60 today. You know, but the reality is that things may become a bit more difficult for us if we don't wake up, actually. You know, the fact that when you talk about public health, we've all seen with Corona, how technology has played a major role in nations' ability to manage public health. We now see how education has been massively disrupted. You know, you can't properly educate your kids if you don't have strong technology infrastructure within your country, if you don't have teachers and administrators who have a solid understanding of how to embed technology into education. We can now see how technology is powering agriculture. So competitiveness of nations is now tied to technology. And the sad thing about technology is that it's not enough for you to have smart people in your country, which is what we always say in Nigeria. That's the sad thing about technology. Technology and your ability to use it for competitiveness is rooted in knowledge, in know-how. If you have a critical mass of people who understand how to build, how to apply technology, then you're talking as a nation. If you're not investing enough in research and development, you will struggle to be able to leverage technology for competitiveness. You can see a couple of entrepreneurs here and there that are doing great stuff, right? For themselves, adding value to the nation. But as a country, if we don't have a strategy that is focused on how do we as a nation take advantage of this technology, you're going to struggle. And what we've seen this year is the fact that we all didn't expect the pandemic. And what the pandemic did was to accelerate a lot of technological solutions and you know, emerging technologies that is matured over the last 5 years. You know, things that people wouldn't do 5 years ago, all of a sudden in 2020, everyone started doing it. You know, in 2020, we now realize that as a company, if you don't use technology, you're not going to be successful. In 2020, we now see that the ESCO of Lagos State must have their meeting on Zoom. You know, they don't have to go into Alausa to have their meetings. So what all this is doing to us is a challenge, is warning us and is challenging us that as we now move into this new normal and the new era, that we need to prepare more for it. So we need to raise a lot of talent. Some of the things that Chika and Chuka talked about. All right, we need to be thinking of talent, not only in terms of people that we can export, but people locally that can work for companies as well. I don't know what GB's experience will be, but in Nigeria, if you grow a technology company that is successful, you need to hire 300 engineers today. I don't think you can find 300 good engineers in Nigeria today, because so many other companies are competing for them. That's the honest truth. People will tell you, yes, we can get some from Mandela, but the reality is some of these folks wants to leave the country. There are other companies like Flutterwave, Paystack, who also wants the talents. So all the banks are competing for the same set of talent. So it's actually difficult to find talent locally. That is on one hand. On the other hand of what Maya talked about, which is funding, we've literally outsourced the funding of our technological solutions to foreign investors, which is fantastic. But the reality is that the byproduct of this is that a lot of the companies that we're building on the continent, not only in Nigeria, don't actually belong to the African continent. A lot of these companies are forced to first register abroad. Some of them enjoy registering there for obvious reasons, because it makes their life easy. We don't have the laws and the policies in place to facilitate, the ability for entrepreneurs to actually encourage investors to bring their money to Nigeria. And you may say that it's not only unique to Nigeria, but there are countries like Singapore that has been able to put policies, laws in place whereby some of the best investors in the world also have offices in Singapore and they do local investment. These are hard questions that we need to ask ourselves. And as we turn 60, it's an opportunity, like Chika said, we can bind together to find interesting ways to build the next level for technology in Nigeria. But that binding together is not going to require only government. It's going to require leadership. And the sort of leadership that we need needs to come from both private sector and the public sector. The private sector players, I always tell people, for those in technology, whenever I'm in Silicon Valley, there's a guy called the Bitcoin guy, I think it's called Tim. Yeah, Tim Draper, right? Everyone knows Tim. Tim is a leader in the tech. But I tell people that for me, I'm not Tim. And this is why I choose what I do in tech. I'm Bill Draper. Bill is Tim's father. And these are people who built the foundation of what Tim and the likes are building on top of today. I may not be building a company like Tim, but I'm building the foundation for people coming behind me to become the team. So for every one of us that is a leader in the tech space, we need to be visioning the ecosystem that provides the opportunity for us not only to build for self, but to attract resources that can help position those that are coming behind us to be able to build as well.
Fantastic, Bosun. Thank you so much for that perspective. Before I go on to the next question, Maya, I want to quickly come to you because I would like to hear your views. Bosun referenced it. And Bosun, once you talk about Nigeria and developing a strategy, I get worried very quickly because that's something we do as a national hobby or pastime. But Maya, I'd like to hear your views on this collaboration because it's popped up in a number of different conversations. You obviously are on the capital side and you probably are doing way more than that. How do you see this coming together? If we're going to make sense of this whole thing as a nation, both for Nigeria and maybe that then becomes a template for the continent, how do you see this coming together in a practical way so that we're able to adequately position ourselves to be able to do the things that we say that we have the potential to do? Maya.
Well, what Bosun mentioned, he addressed a lot of key and very important points. And unfortunately, I don't have the answer. And I don't have the answer of when this will happen and who has to, or what radical change needs to happen in order for this to be facilitated. But I do think that it's essential for government to understand and support the technology sector in order to create policies that are attractive to foreign investment, that are attractive to local H&Is to start participating in the space, and is attractive like a governing body that sort of hears cases in a reasonable amount of time, and the general outcomes based on the circumstances can be generally predicted, as in it sticks with the policies that are easy to navigate and make sense. So I think that there are a number of things that need to happen on the government and regulation side first in order to be able to build the fundamentals for that collaboration. Because as Bosun did say, as things currently exist, even we as a Nigeria-focused fund if a company is domiciled domestically and doesn't have plans to go international, that's not only given the lack of double taxation treaties that Nigeria has with other nations, so at the sort of international capital level, but also domestically, as far as navigating what happens when the company plans to IPO domestically, in a fairly illiquid local public market, or what happens if there's any sort of, even from the employee side, navigating the domestic unions, or navigating sort of if there's any issues on the capital side. I can't reasonably predict the outcome, particularly when I don't know who's going to be the next people to come to power. So Nigeria's one of the only countries where we're actively investing, where such a main component of our diligence actually includes who's in office, what do we think they're going to do. That affects not only the macro and micro side, but also the regulations that directly impact the companies that I'm investing in. So I would say, I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know when that's going to happen, but ideally that does happen. And I think that's an absolutely essential part of facilitating the increase in flow in capital, as well as making an ecosystem that is, amenable to international and even domestic collaboration. I think the other thing that needs to and ought to happen is we do focus a lot on B2B businesses targeting Africa's traditional billion-dollar industries. So if you look at the key contributors to GDP in the markets where we're most actively investing, we're investing in technical solutions that are focused on those. And I think that having traditional or like incumbents, more seeing technology as less of a sort of threat and a competition, and more of a facilitator and potential sort of dramatically impact their unit economics in a positive way, or give access to new consumer demographics they never before had access to. I think there are a few people who've seen the light. But a lot of the other players I've seen, it's still lip service. So if there was some, I don't know if it's a training, I don't know if it's a mentality, something like that, but the sort of acceptance of technology and support of entrepreneurship and startups, like a really, one of the key differences that there was a report done or research done studying why is it that there are so many more unicorns, whatever, that come out of Silicon Valley relative to other ecosystems, despite the fact that there's not necessarily radically more capital than Tel Aviv or New York City or even Boston. Yeah. And the main difference is that in Silicon Valley, for every sort of top level executives, they sat on 5 to 7 boards, and the closest competitor was 2 to 3 boards. And so that's like the transfer of knowledge and expertise in a society where mentorship advisory is fundamentally ingrained. And I think that's really important, not only for the CEOs of the incumbents and the top traditional businesses, but also, again, a culture that's sort of embedded into the businesses in general. And the other thing is, because of the lack of patent and et cetera enforcement, there is still this fear of collaboration that's kind of intrinsic to the Nigerian ecosystem, not necessarily so much in the tech sector, but in business in general. And so that goes back to the government and the regulation side of things, and talking about how do we sort of see the enforceability on that side, but also just a general shift in belief and focus on collaboration, and also the acceptance of and value of equity. So right now, employees in general, I think, really put a premium on salary, and the actual equity of the business is not necessarily seen as equally important, because I mean, businesses have gone out overnight. This is a pretty volatile ecosystem, and I think a better collaboration, or maybe even a different structure and a different payout for employees, such that there can be aligned visions from all parts of the business, as well as far as options and equity ownership. So some sort of Africa innovation in the concept of ownership, I really want to see, and that's something that I've been passionately thinking about and working on.
So those are really, really interesting points, and I'm going to take from those points to sort of move to GB, because I think there are 2 things, and I hope I can remember them. Well, yes, you talked about the equity bit, and then you talked about sort of the interaction between the more traditional organizations and enterprises and the startups coming into those spaces. And I think that with Flutterwave, GB is sitting smack at the center of that. because you have fintech coming in, and obviously you had the big strong banks in the Nigerian sector who more or less seem to have all the market power, and somehow you've been able to make a success of it. So one perspective in that conversation is one of the challenges, or well, one of the interesting things, or one of the motivators in getting people to take the risk of these entrepreneurial venture are the urban legends around founder exits, for instance. So my question to you, GB, would be, it's in two parts. The first one is, how have you been able to, how do you think a startup, using your experience, can navigate that space between, maybe there is also room to work with them to be able to drive larger value for the ecosystem at large? That's one bit. And then the second bit is, practically, like Maya has alluded to, in being able to draw and retain talent. Typically, equity would have been the way to go if you were in other clients, but that doesn't seem to work here. How have you seen that play out with your organization and with fellow startup founders? And what do you think can happen or needs to be done as we move forward? And I know Maya has alluded to an African innovation thing where we're able to share this, where we're able to maybe correct, maybe update, maybe evolve these ideas around ownership on the continent. So it'll be great to have your perspectives, GB.
Thanks so much. So let me start with the second question first. My thought process around that would be, retaining talent is beyond just equity, if you ask me, right? It's a bunch of so many factors to retain great folks in your company as you scale that venture, right? One of the things that we have used at Flutterwave is culture, right? We are very, very clear about our culture and our vision, our mission. We're very, very, we try to emphasize the fact that we want to be the great company where people matter. That for us is very important. And I think because you haven't seen a lot of exit in the ecosystem where employees of startups, could, cash out in a way. So people do not understand the value of equity that they hold, right? But beyond the equity, right, you need people who are in it just for the mission, the vision, beyond the financial gains, which though is very important. It has to be, there has to be a global reason for retaining talent. So for all that is critical, right? On the first question, I would say what we've done so far has been, we try to not be a gatekeeper in the ecosystem. We try to be an enabler, right? Because we know how much work it took for us to get to where we are at the moment. One thing we do very well is we partner with fellow startups who are launching new products, who are starting new stuff, because we understand, the multiplier effect of creating access and product in the community that works well, create a bigger
I don't know if it's me again. Okay, we can hear you.
than one area I've seen which has worked is basically, doing exactly that, which is creating that access. So we like to be an infrastructure provider. We like to think we're the plumbing of payment, and anyone can do the next great payment product on our infrastructure. And we've seen amazing people build amazing stuff, by using just a piece of what we've built, right? Which is great, and that's the goal that we are trying to be here. We've seen a lot of the big banks in Nigeria or in Africa, have this access, this infrastructure, and they've not created access for startups to scale on the rails they've built. Or on our side is the reverse, right? Any access we have, it's exposed. We've got open APIs from day one of the company, and the goal basically is, create that access for other folks to build niche product that can serve the ecosystem, right? And then, the scale of every startup will be different. There will be startups who will scale to be a $10 million company, and that is fine. Some will be 100 million, some will be 20, some will be a billion, right? It doesn't really matter. Right now, we just want to be able to create that cycle of starting, exiting, making sure the entire ecosystem can see the value created, right? And the effect will be massive in the ecosystem, right? If exits happen and people can say, yes, it is possible, you will see a lot more people try to work in startup. And what I also want to mention is what Chuka mentioned, actually, regarding other skill set in the tech space that is not engineering skills, right? And those are really in high demand, right? Because a lot of startups today are struggling with finding treasury experts, right? Ops experts, guys who can scale customer success, guys who can scale compliance, right? And those things are just missing right now in the ecosystem. You need people who actually, understand this space. And those are pretty much what I call death traps for startups, because not having the right compliance infrastructure in place, the right, ops infrastructure in place, no matter how good the technology you built is, the customers will still come off being disappointed, because managing that entire ecosystem is very important, right? So that for us is also critical. So it's an ecosystem. It isn't just engineering; it's everything, right? Keeping talent who are engineers, who are non-engineers, who are growth people, who are sales folks, account managers, technical account managers. Those roles are very important in building a company, because at the end of the day, the tech company, yeah, but still a business, right? And that has to be scaled. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for, for the tidbits that you've been able to share. I think those are really useful. Chika, just coming back to the skills question. Obviously, if we're looking at this scenario where we're able to get this huge workforce of, upskill a large number of people, one of the conversations we need to have, and I think a number of people, Bosun has alluded to this, Maya has alluded to this, we need the regulatory framework to be able to manage that one way or the other. And it could range from things like just a legal framework to manage challenges that could come from that, from taxation, all sorts of things. Now, I know that you're going to say that maybe we're about 10 million miles from that conversation, but the question that I would say to you is, what do you think is missing from a regulatory government policy perspective to be able to support this ecosystem that provides skill globally but is resident here in Nigeria? How should the government be thinking about this? What should they be thinking about? What considerations are there? And how should we be approaching this challenge?
Yeah, thanks. So, a tricky question. I don't know whether to say what I really think or what.
Yes.
What I should say. I think you
should say what you really think.
Say what you really think.
So there's two things going on, right, that I've observed. One is that government is very interested, government at every level that I've interacted with, so from the presidency to the bank, to the CBN, to several state governors, are very interested in what can they do. They recognize the opportunity to some extent. They know there's something there, and many people have reached out, and we're talking to many people and trying to support many people. So there's the interest, there's the will, right? And in the case of the CBN, that will was backed by action and and money, right? So that's one. However, the performance so far, let's say in the last 5 years where this will really started, I think the performance has been poor. By performance, I mean the results of government intervention. If you look at ecosystems that, some of the big ecosystems that we know about, Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, Singapore, Mexico, even London, that is already very big, right? Government, in India, right? Every year, government is putting more money, cash, not studies, not story. Real cash is going to catalyze different elements of the ecosystem, right? The Silicon Valley VC industry was originally seeded. The actual money that went in came from the US government, from the SBA, if I'm not mistaken. The Tel Aviv ecosystem, the original capital, came to attract other capital, came from the government. Singapore, same thing. When I say it came from, they did a lot of it was matching investment. So say, okay, bring, and I've done venture capital, and we're raising the fund, and people, some of the international LPs wanted to give us money, but they said, Nigeria is risky, and there's a lot of things like how much is the government giving you? Because every year we have governments from China, Turkey, Poland, different governments coming to us. These are the LPs in America. The LPs are the people that give money to the VCs. So every year, governments from different countries are telling us if we put 10 million, they will put 30 million so that we can bring our money and our expertise to help grow our industry. So there's been a lot of good intentions, but it hasn't, I mean, I was very super excited to hear that Maya's fund got investment from NSIA. I mean, that's a start, but this is not the scale that we should be moving at. This is not the pace. This is, this is an opportunity that is there now. This is like a penalty. It's like the goalkeeper is not there. He's not score the goal. We are wasting time. So we have to move quick. And partly because, we talk about our population advantage, whatever, but we also know that it's a ticking time bomb. People are coming. The people that are 14 years old now, if they get to 20 and things haven't changed, I don't know how we can. So we have to move fast. So that's, that the intention is there, but it's not coming as quick. The action is not coming. And to make matters worse, some of the regulation is killing businesses. This year alone, we've seen 2 government actions that, there's so few businesses in Nigeria, so few startups that are funded. You know how hard it is for a company to raise $5 million, $10 million. I have my partner in Rice Capital, Nazar, he came in very early through Tiger Global. He invested in Joyman Chicken and all that stuff. He believes in it. He's not Nigerian. He believes in it, but he invests in Mexico and other places too. This year, 2 of his companies that he invested in, Gokada, government regulation, tried to kill it. Iroko, government regulation, has caused them to leave Nigeria. This is the guy that when we went to Silicon Valley a few years ago, he brought together on the trip, for the government trip, right? He and I worked together, but he brought his relationships, about $50 billion of limited partner money was in the room on 2 weeks' notice. We had about 2 weeks' notice to bring those people in. He brought them in. The government spoke to them, selling the Nigeria story. So if your government is, in England, it's not as if government regulation is only in Nigeria. In England, London government said they are banning Uber. 2 years they've been saying they're banning Uber, but Uber is still there because they're talking to them. They're telling them change. They're discussing. I don't know what's going on, but Uber is there. Nigeria's one is that, that's it. Stop Okada. We don't like Okada. Go and die. Okada close. No, it's not work that way. That's capital gone. And at this stage, we're so small. It's not that, I don't know whether, the rightness or wrongness. I've been a CEO for a long time. I know that leadership is not easy. You have to make decisions. But there's a time, at a certain point, you err on the side of, you choose what you err on the side of. And I think that the government right now should be erring on the side of leave these companies, let them grow. And if we're going to do something that's going to affect this ecosystem, let's talk to them and make sure it's not going to kill their business. If they say it's going to kill their business, even if we suspect it may be lying, let's leave them. Let them create jobs. Let them be big. We'll tax them. Let's disturb some other people. So I think I've said what I probably, I don't know if I've said all that. there you have it.
Now, since Maya was the one that sort of pushed you down that path, I'll come back to her right now to say, so Maya, given everything that Chika has said, given everything that Chika has said, given these challenges, given these pains, that people who have taken the risk of investing in a very young ecosystem have to face. How challenging has it been for you raising funds that you can deploy here locally in Nigeria and in other countries in Africa? And I know Chika has sort of touched on it a bit, but what needs to change? What really needs to change to make your job easier? Let me put it that way.
Well, fortunately, no one would be dealing with all the madness of Nigeria if there wasn't very sweet opportunity on the other side. Like, as much as we are all like, this place is so terrible, blah, 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 blah. There's 200 million people. There's 20 million, 20 million in the largest city. We are competing every year for the wealthiest Black nation in the world and the largest economy in Africa. You can't ignore what's happening in Nigeria. So, yeah, I mean, and I think at least for, let me not speak for my investors because I don't know, but I'll speak for myself. It's kind of the plug your nose and jump, and and we are because we are investing not for the short 3 to 5 year period, but we are this is a 10-year VC vehicle with potential to extend. We're anticipating that we're hoping and praying and actively involving ourselves as much as possible, but we are anticipating that in coming years there will be increased stability in the economy and on the regulation side, not decreased. And so that's one of my theses that allows me to participate in the wildness that currently is Lagos, Nigeria, and Nigeria in general. As far as my investors, yeah, they see the incredible greenfield opportunity that exists here. And when you have higher return potential, you generally have higher risk potential. And so that's really what we're dealing with. And the difficulty of raising funds, I mean, I was passively fundraising, I would say, for like 6 years. I first tried to start a fund in 2014, 2015. They were like, you don't know anything. And you're 1 year out of college. No. And so started the advisory company, literally going door to door in Silicon Valley. And they didn't come because they saw the Nigerian opportunity. They come because I wouldn't leave people alone. They were like, fine, we'll send somebody, leave me alone. So I would say that journey in and of itself has been, and then we launched the fund in 2017 after bringing like 50 international firms from, working with Y Combinator and 500 startups and GitHub and Techstars and blah, 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 blah. And it took years of active deal making, running firms Africa strategy, hustling on the continent. They did over 30 deals in Nigeria alone to get people to commit to the fund. So this was not an overnight, like, sure, I'll write you a check, whatever. This was like 3 years of hard data points, and then another 2 years of active fundraising. So to answer your question, it was pulling through the nail, but we also started when the ecosystem wasn't, when Nigeria wasn't so sexy, when people were still asking, do they have internet in Africa? And not, where are you anticipating the next major IPO? What Western nation are you anticipating the next African IPO? So times have changed, and it's significantly, I wouldn't say significantly easier, but people are, the ignorance around Africa and the awareness around Africa and the Nigeria opportunity, and people, basic facts are becoming commonplace, like the mobile penetration, that there's more users in blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, as well as the Nigerians are the most educated nationality in the US, blah, 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 those great statistics. Those facts are becoming commonplace, and people are just becoming more aware generally. And as the top participants in the ecosystems in Silicon Valley, in Tel Aviv, in China, and Japan, et cetera, are all dedicating resources and actively in investing in the African ecosystem, it's kind of sort of like a chain effect. So I would say, due to peer pressure, people are actively participating. I wouldn't say the risk is mitigated in any capacity. Certainly in Rwanda, in Ghana, in even Kenya, that are very amenable to foreign direct investment. I think oil has been a plague to Nigeria and to its ability to diversify and create policies that are attractive to allow the tech ecosystem to thrive. But I would say in years forward, or thinking forward, what would facilitate even more is we just need to keep having our success stories and promoting those of us who do make it in the ecosystem. Every story for an IPO is another 1,000 companies that gets funded, 100,000 companies that gets funded. Yeah. So every single success point allows the trickle, or the unlocking of capital for the new generation of Africans raising funds.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Maya. Thank you for I think just thinking through it, the last point around telling those success stories in such a way that they open doors for those coming behind. I think that's one part that maybe would help a lot. But very quickly, Chuka, and this is, moving back to this skilling conversation that we talked about, you made a very interesting point about, rather than trying to create 1,000 decagons, why don't we use the current university systems? That's the current education infrastructure that we have. Now, beyond the chance of great Akoka and great UI and great wherever greatness is, how do you see that playing out practically, given the challenges that those of us that studied within the current education system are very aware of? So this is not a theoretical how it could work. This is very practically, how do we get somebody in Federal Polytechnic Auchi to get software engineering skills that allow him work remotely for Microsoft or Google or Facebook? How do you marry those two worlds in a way that makes sense practically? And is this something that could happen now, or do we still have some work to do before we start having those conversations?
Hey, good question. Well, if you had asked me this question a year ago, my answer would have been quite different. But given the pandemic today and what the pandemic has taught us, if not anything, how powerful technology is, I think most of the initial concepts when we had these conversations earlier. Oh, and by the way, I never said we shouldn't build the decagons. I'm saying the more the merrier. I just wanted to at that point. But given the situation that we have today and the way the pandemic has forced us to embrace technology, I think technology would have a significant role to play. Now, in order for this thing to thrive, in my own opinion, I think the people who would be the players in this project or in this venture would be, one, the practitioners themselves. So the people like us who are running companies, who have startups, the Flutterways, the Paystacks, and those of us who are doing business, out in the world, right? And those of us who've interacted and, related with, the Silicon Valleys and, all the other tech ecosystems around the world. 1, 2, the people in government, like I've said, the policymakers, and number 3, the educationers, right? Or the educators rather. The two quickest, more direct rather path to this would be educate the educators, right? So if you take some of the, teachers who currently, or the lecturers who currently are in the educational system, and I know this might be, quite a tall stretch, but I believe that if the government, I'm saying if the government is really hell-bent on making something work, of course, through the NUCs and all the academic institutions that govern the universities, they can federate policies that would get, all these parties involved. And I know we're laughing at this, but I'm saying this is the practical way I see, right? Because the educators already have a system and a process they use to educate individuals, right? It is just finding a way to enhance that and bring in our own perspective, bring in, what are we doing in the real world, right? This isn't going to pick up syllabuses from, the US, the UK. No, this is we, the practitioners, sitting down and coming up with syllabuses that tailor-made to Africa, because there's a unique way we Africans learn, right? And if we take advantage of how we do things rather than, building on top of that, rather than just restructuring the whole thing, because a full restructuring, I don't know how feasible that is, right? You can't get, you can take, let me not start with the idioms. The point I'm making is, if we already have a foundation and a system, the best thing we can do is try to oil the system and improve on it. So practically, it will be, okay, get the practitioners into a room, get the educators into a room. Some of the practitioners can also educate in their spare time, but come up with a federated syllabus that all the universities or all the secondary schools, because it's not just universities alone. I feel it's starting early. My kid is my older kid is 10 years and my younger kid is 6. The chap already knows how to use a tablet, already knows how to educate himself. He's already taking coding lessons, right? And I know that we're targeting universities because, okay, we need to start somewhere, but also secondary school is also another place, because I think it was Chika who made a very important point. The people who are 14 years old are coming after us, right? The age range between secondary school, or I'm not sure what it's called, basic 1, 2, 3. I don't know what the educational system is like. We left school a while ago, but I think from secondary school, from JS1 to secondary school 3 to senior secondary school 3, that is a very good, formative era. So start to attack the people who will be coming in another 10 years. And I think even with the Union of Secondary Schools, that would probably be a much easier place to go and attempt to find a way to work with them, replicate a syllabus that can work, and then take the model and then apply it to universities. But I don't think, this effort will obviously involve a lot of capital and commitment from both sides of the coin. And I know, like Chika has pointed out, there are people who are coming into our ecosystem, that want to see how they can make the best from Nigeria. So if we want to make the best from Nigeria, we need to mold Nigeria. And molding Nigeria starts with the youth, with the kids who are coming behind us. So practically, that's what I see. And that's the strategy I see. I mean, of course, you can figure out the finer details and how granular you want to get it. But I mean, from a broad perspective, from a practical standpoint, that's what I think we can do.
Thank you so much, Chuka. So Bosun, very quickly, I'm coming to you, but so I would want to take a maximum of 2 questions. I would first of all apologize. I'm sure that there are questions that are coming in, but I'll take 2 questions. I would probably have about 20 or 30 seconds to decide which questions I would pick. So you may have a really good question that I miss out, and I sincerely apologize for that beforehand. So if you have any question you would like to ask any of the panelists, please just put it into the Q&A box or something. I'll pick it up from there and I'll ask the question very quickly. But Bosun, you have the gifts and the privilege of sort of bringing this together for us, because I think what you do is really, really critical to achieving what we've set out to do in this conversation. So my question is, we've talked about Israel, we've talked about Singapore, we've talked about Silicon Valley. This last question is, what key lessons can we learn from other countries that have successfully built thriving technology ecosystems? Are there any low-hanging fruits that can be addressed? And what role can the private sector play in catalyzing this? Now, the reason I ask this is, we've talked about, I think Israel is a very, very interesting example. Population is low, the different challenges they face, but somehow they've been able to create an ecosystem that is cutting a larger piece of the cake from the global digital economic system. And maybe we have a chance there if we learn from them. So from your perspective, what do you think?
To be honest, I think the answer to that question is in what Chika already shared. If you're using Israel as an example, then the only thing to learn from Israel is strategic intention. If you know the cybersecurity space, for instance, I think there's a terrible figure that says the R&D funding that goes into cybersecurity, and I'm not talking about protecting nations, I'm talking about cybersecurity as a business. It's about 80 or something crazy % of the global budget for research and development in cybersecurity that is from Israel. And the reason they do it is not just to protect their nation. So they produce a lot of the security solutions in the world. They make so much money from it. So the story of Israel is a combination of strategic intention from government knowing that, technology is one of the areas in which we want to be competitive. It's one of the areas in which we want to drive value for our nation. And these are the strengths that we have, and this is how much we're going to invest in it. Then the other part is the fact that Israel, I think people always think Israel is just one small country. We always keep forgetting that the Jews are linked to this country, right? And a lot of the top tech entrepreneurs that in the world, most of them are actually Jews. So in a way, they're linked to Israel. So there's also the diaspora and the private sector playing a role. So I think one thing we can learn to leapfrog development in Nigeria is actually our diaspora. We always think we do not have enough people, we do not have enough know-how, but this is not true. We have tons of engineers, scientists all over the world. I think there's got to be a strategic intention and program that is focused on trying to capture those people. You know, see what Maya is doing. You know, Maya will qualify as a diaspora. Myself and my co-founder, we were in the UK when we came back to set up CCO. Yeah, you know, Chika, I know Chika, I don't know if he still lives in the US or not, but Chika has his, you know, is based in both sides of the world. So there's so much that we can learn there, and I think we need to find a way to do it. And on the private sector side, I really honestly think that as much as we complain about the government, the problem with the government in Nigeria is also not the lack of intention from government. The problem with government in Nigeria is actually self-interest from private sector. Because what you see, that whenever you see government act in a certain way, they're playing out what someone in private sector is lobbied and proclaimed to be the way forward. You see, Chika was part of the guys who drove for Central Bank, for instance, to invest in talent in Nigeria. You know, that's an example. So I think what we need to do more from the private sector is that we need to be more intentional. And I mentioned this in my first intervention. It sounded as if I was just talking about the challenges. No, we need to be more intentional. I think the leaders in the private sector needs to start to see tech beyond just enriching themselves. We don't have the chance to build startups the way the American kids or the American tech folks are building startups. We're building startups because this is the future of our continent. And whenever we strategize about the future, we should do it together with the intention of building a platform that can enable so much more generation, because our country and continent has been disadvantaged for so long. So we don't have that chance of, I want to build my own big, large startup and I want to, yeah, you can do that. But honestly, there's a gap. And that gap is coming from the fact that the private sector is not united enough to help governments thoroughly figure out the best way to go. Let's stop giving those advice that ends up encouraging government to spend money in the wrong things that may benefit a few people, but may not benefit the nation. So a great example of what we can do is what Chika has done. You know, they've invested in talent. How do we make sure that can now be available to much more people to raise more talent in the country? That'll be what I'll say as the way forward.
Thank you so much, Bosun. So I've gone through the questions. I'm going to put together about 3 or 4 questions into. I'll try to figure out how best to position this. And this is to Chika and to Maya. We have said a number of things, including Bosun. We've said government, we've said government, we've said government. And, you know, government is everyone and no one. Let me just leave it at that. So my question is very specific, and I'll start with Maya. If we're not to use government, if you were going to be specific to say, these are the 2 institutions that I believe within this government that we should be talking to and liaising with if we want to get the right outcomes. And this is not a question to say, oh, there's a Ministry of Technology and all of that. It's not the nomenclature around the organization. It's based on your experience interacting with these entities. What 2 would you say would be critical for somebody listening to this as a player in the private sector who would be looking to put together this collaboration or this synergistic relationship? What 2 institutions would you say are critical to achieving this?
Okay, so I'll answer that question in a different way. I'm not going to use any names, but I would say that a policy that needs to come in place in order to make this work is, and I brought this up, I was on a panel with various, some of the organizations within government that have been creating the policies that are not so startup friendly. If it is a requirement that anyone who is creating laws about a specific industry cannot have vested interest in said industry. If I am a government official that exclusively is writing and passing laws, and I have shares in banks or one telecommunications company, maybe if there was something where all publicly listed companies or all of them had to put an allocation of shares into an entity, and then that was like a pension for government officials. So it could be equal nepotism across all private sector players, that would work. But if we're talking, I'm like, oh, why did this one organization get a license to do XYZ and nobody else did? And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So if there is, I would say that would probably be one of the most impactful things as far as creating policies that are beneficial and create a shift in the sort of cannibalistic regulation we're seeing that has come out. The other thing is, again, I'm not going to use any names, but we keep forgetting, and if I don't know if people just don't know, but there are powers that be that sit behind those who are floating in and out of office that have the real control and influence. And I don't know why those names are never brought up in conversations. And those are the people that actually require the convincing. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to go into any names or details, but I'm sure that we all know and are all aware. And I'm not sure why those parties are not more actively included in conversations around tech, because that's what's going to change things. And then the last thing is, I mean, money talks in Nigeria. So if there is and I keep there are some of the leaders of, the biggest multi-billion-dollar technology companies in Silicon Valley and Tel Aviv, et cetera, et cether. They're like, hey, Maya, what should we do to help the Nigerian ecosystem, or how should we get involved? And why haven't we had say, for example, Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and, a couple of these other guys come together with the president and, some of the key influencers in this space to have a conversation? Because I can say something, but I'm not a billionaire. So like, I can't necessarily directly tell you how you can make money in technology from having done it, at scale to the billions. But people who have in Western worlds coming and saying, hey, you can still get wealthy, I can still get wealthy if you create policies like this. I think it would be very helpful, because at the end of the day, these decisions that are being made are around getting money in people's pockets. So and I think the faster that we realize this and accept this and then move forward with this in mind, the faster that we can create conclusions that are helpful for the ecosystem at large and properly incentivize those in power.
Thank you very much, Maya. Very quickly, Chika. So Maya has refused to mention names. I assume that you would say what is in your heart. So what two institutions? What two institutions? What two institutions would you say, from a government policy perspective, are critical to achieving the level of collaboration that we're looking for?
I'll answer, but I also want to say that I don't want us to put too much emphasis on the role of government. I don't want
So I'm asking this from a question in the.
No, I'll answer it. I just want to, because I'm talking about government and Maya's talking about government. It's like we're all talking about government. The truth is that we are doing the work. We're doing our job. Like everybody's doing their job. We're fortunate as tech people to happen to be professional. Look at the healthcare workers. They stood up. They did their job. COVID has come and they've kept us safe and they've done their job. And they've, government or no government, with government, in spite of whether the hospital is good or not, they've done their job and they've saved us. Or they are saving us so far, and they will save us by God's grace. Now, so we are doing our work. We are creating companies. We are doing fine. It's going. Nigerian tech ecosystem is going to grow, government or no government. And to be honest, it's not been that bad at all, right? Government, like I said, there's a lot of interest from government, and a big part of it. I didn't have like close relationship with the CBN at all. And I pitched to them and the bankers committee, and these are things that you read in the newspaper. You see that they're creating this fund, and you say, some people have come with their games again. They're trying to, but this one I was involved with. I saw they did the thing, and it's there. People are borrowing money and doing different things in tech and in creative industries like that. So things are happening. I don't want us to make it like, things are not happening, and for us to be discouraged from engaging, because there's a lot of good intention, and sometimes it just takes somebody in private sector that has thought things through to go and meet the government person that has the power, and the things will happen. But government or no government, anyway, we are doing our work, things are happening, and you know, progress will be made regardless. So having said that, I think looking at, you know, let's just stay with finance, because I think us bringing a lot more capital into Nigeria will generally lead to, you know, in the short term, more jobs, more growth, more everything, and in the long term, more exit, right? So I will just focus on capital. So I think that in other ecosystems, there's two things that I've seen happen a lot. One is that some entity like NSIA, or NSIA is sovereign wealth fund, so that might be too big, too high up, right? But some entity, or Bank of Industry, some entity that is responsible for industrial development creates a large fund that, not that they start giving out as loans, that all those is fine, but creates a large fund to attract a matching fund. So that can be Bank of Industry, it can be somebody, some entity, or it can even be CBN, I don't know. But creates a fund, let's say $100 million fund, and says to VCs across the world that are already experienced, especially VCs in Silicon Valley, because we will need that relational partnership for exits, right? So people, right, in Silicon Valley, London, or wherever, right, and says, if your firm wants to come to Nigeria and you're going to have a Nigerian operating partner, one operating partner, for your $100 million that you want to bring, we will invest it's not dash, it's not a grant. We will co-invest, we will help you get closer to, so if Maya raised a $10 million fund, 4 years, I mean, it took her, I don't know the details, but from my own experience, I would just say, like, if when she started raising that fund, a government agency said, take $5 million if you can get the remaining 5. Every other conversation should have been having would have been, I have 5 million. Give me 1. And she would have probably raised this thing in a third of the time it took her to raise. And I'm not saying like a guess. It's not like, you know, this is how others have done it. So it's not like we don't need to recreate the wheel, right? So that's one big thing. I think a second thing, again, it's sort of capital related. It has to do with, I think, the incentive to the holders of capital, to the private holders of capital. Incentives around, so specific things like direct tax write-offs to companies for investing in a sector. If you take a company like MTN or the banks or whatever, you say to them, so this is what England, as big as the England tech ecosystem is and startup is, what they are doing specifically, they're saying, take from the money you're supposed to take as tax or whatever, invest it. And if you lose it, we will write it off your future taxes. So you won't actually lose. That's what England has done. Other countries are doing different things. The US has the opportunity zones. Right now, America, as big as it is, even in San Francisco, 5 miles or so from Silicon Valley, there's an opportunity zone. If you invest in that opportunity zone, the profit from that investment will be tax-free. And there are even some tax incentives right now. So there is something, I don't know whether it's FIRS, I don't know Ministry of Finance, I don't know the right agency, but there is, and that this whole like tax thing is something that can help attract also senior engineers into Nigeria, because now that there's remote work from everywhere, right? So if we can get some senior engineers to come and spend a year here or 2 years here because they'll be tax-free because they have 10 years experience. So there's something, what I'm trying to say is that we have to understand that there is global competition for capital and talent.
Yeah.
Right. And countries like America are incentivizing the holders of that capital. We're competing against America, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, all this South Africa, to say, bring your capital here. We shouldn't be like, anyway, so we should put out our own incentive so that the capital can come. Those are the things that we can do.
Thank you very much, Chika. So GB, I'll end with you. And this is a very interesting question that is a bit like what Chika was talking about. So the person is saying, we've heard enough about how we need to work with government, how the private sector needs to work together, and this collaboration. But for the individual, what do we take away from this? And I know we've talked a bit about skilling and things like that, but from your perspective, GB, for the individual, whether it's as somebody looking to start a technology entrepreneur, a technology startup, or somebody looking to gain skills and go into the workforce? I know we've touched on it, in a few conversations, but from your own perspective, to just close this out, what would you say? What would your word of advice be to that person?
I would say join one. Yeah, join one, right?
Okay.
Gain the experience, work in the ecosystem, right? That's very important. A lot of the founders that we've seen who are doing great right now, they've got that experience. It helps when the journey gets tough and lonely. And despite the glamorous stuff we all see, it is a dark and lonely journey, right? So it's important to understand that from the get-go. It's not easy. It is hard work building a company in Nigeria. It is hard work. So join one, get the experience, build a network. Those things will come in handy when you eventually, start a company, right? Around the table right now, Chuka, Chika, Maya, the experience everybody has is great, and that's what helps here. So join one, work for one, be a part of the ecosystem, be a solution for someone, then venture out. That is my advice. Yeah.
Thank you very much, GB. So thank you to everyone. I apologize that we couldn't take more than those two questions. I tried to combine a few. Thank you so much, Maya, Chika, GB, Bosun, and Chuka. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been good use of your time for the guests who joined in. We had about 150 people. Thank you so much. I know that this has been recorded. I will find out if the recording would be available. But once again, thank you very much for your time. And this brings it to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.